The studio lights were blinding, casting a warm golden hue across the sleek set of the primetime political program. The host, a polished anchor with years of experience navigating heated exchanges, had just introduced the evening's panel when Senator Chuck Schumer leaned forward in his seat, his fingers drumming impatiently on the desk. He had the look of a man who had been waiting for the perfect opening to pounce, and as the discussion shifted toward justice reform and political accountability, he seized it with the precision of someone who had spent a lifetime in Washington's gladiatorial arena. "You know what the problem is with people like Pam Bondi?" Schumer's voice boomed, his tone dripping with disdain. He didn't even glance toward her at first, instead addressing the camera directly, as though delivering a sermon to millions of viewers at home. "She's a narcissist. Someone far more interested in chasing headlines and basking in her own reflection than doing the hard, unglamorous work of public service." The studio went still. For a second, the air itself seemed to tighten, as if even the oxygen in the room recoiled from the bluntness of the attack. The host's eyes flickered wide before he quickly tried to mask his surprise with a neutral expression. A handful of audience members gasped audibly, while others exchanged glances, the kind that silently asked, "Did he really just say that?" Pam Bondi, seated just across from Schumer, didn't react immediately. She shifted slightly in her chair, her posture unshaken, her expression calm. She crossed her legs deliberately and rested her hands on her lap. Then, she tilted her head just slightly, her eyes narrowing as a faint, knowing smile curved her lips. It wasn't the defensive outrage Schumer had seemed to expect. If anything, her silence was louder than words, magnifying the weight of the insult he had hurled across the table. Schumer noticed, and his irritation deepened. He had come armed with barbs, expecting a battle, but the lack of immediate pushback threw him off balance. His hand tightened around his pen, and he tapped it against his notes in a rhythm that betrayed his unease. The host cleared his throat and attempted to smooth over the tension. "Senator, that's a strong statement. Pam Bondi has held significant positions in public office and has had a prominent legal career. Surely there's more nuance here." But Schumer cut him off, his voice rising. "Nuance? There's no nuance in opportunism. Look, I've been in this game a long time. I can tell when someone is motivated by service to the people and when they're motivated by service to themselves. Pam Bondi has made a career of inserting herself into controversies, not solving them." The jab was sharp, but the audience had begun to murmur, a clear sign that not everyone was buying his narrative. Bondi remained quiet, her eyes fixed on Schumer now, studying him the way a lawyer studies a hostile witness on the stand. She leaned back in her chair and let the senator dig himself deeper. "I'll let that one speak for itself," she finally said, her voice smooth, almost amused. It was a single line, delivered with such controlled poise that it landed heavier than if she had erupted in anger. Some in the audience chuckled softly at her restraint, and the cameras caught the faint twitch of Schumer's jaw. Behind the cameras, producers scrambled as social media feeds lit up like wildfire. Viewers clipped the exchange and posted it online with captions like, "Schumer unhinged," and, "Pam Bondi takes the high road." The tension wasn't just confined to the studio, it was spilling into millions of homes in real time. The host, sensing the energy in the room, turned to the third guest on the panel, Karoline Leavitt. A rising star. In conservative politics, Karoline had been invited for her perspective as a fresh, fiery voice in the national conversation. Until now, she had been sitting quietly, jotting notes, her pen scratching against her pad as though cataloging every word. The camera panned to her, and in that moment, the atmosphere shifted palpably. The audience leaned forward, sensing something was about to break. Karoline adjusted her microphone and looked directly at Schumer, her eyes gleaming with a mix of indignation and confidence. "You know, Senator," she began, her tone calm but laced with steel, "it's fascinating to hear you call Pam Bondi a narcissist. Because if we're going to talk about people addicted to cameras, addicted to power, addicted to headlines, well, the American people don't have to look far. They see it every time you step up to a podium." The words cracked through the air like a whip. The audience erupted into applause, some even standing in their seats. The host's eyebrows shot up, and even Pam Bondi, still composed, allowed herself the faintest grin of satisfaction. Schumer, however, leaned back in his chair, smirk faltering for the first time. Karoline wasn't finished. She leaned forward, her voice gaining force. Pam Bondi is a fighter. She's taken on corruption, she's stood her ground in the face of political attacks, and she's never been afraid to call out hypocrisy. That's not narcissism, that's leadership. What the American people are sick of, Senator, is career politicians like you, clinging to power, wagging your finger at anyone who dares to challenge the status quo. The crowd roared, drowning out the faint protests. Schumer tried to interject. He opened his mouth, searching for a rebuttal, but the noise of the audience swallowed his words. Pam Bondi finally leaned toward her microphone, her voice steady and cool. You know, Chuck, I don't really need to defend myself tonight. I think Karoline just summed up exactly what millions of Americans feel. The host tried to regain control of the conversation, but it was clear the tide had turned. Schumer's attack had backfired, transforming what he thought would be a decisive blow into an embarrassing moment of vulnerability. Karoline Leavitt's intervention had ignited the studio with energy, and the audience wasn't about to let the senator off the hook. As the segment wrapped up and cameras cut to a commercial break, Schumer adjusted his tie, his face set in a forced smile that barely masked his frustration. Pam Bondi exchanged a knowing glance with Karoline, who returned it with a subtle nod. The battle lines were drawn, but the real fight was just beginning. The studio had transformed into something more than a debate stage. It felt like an arena, the audience now on the edge of their seats, waiting to see if Senator Chuck Schumer could recover after Karoline Leavitt's verbal onslaught. The bright lights seemed hotter, harsher, exposing every twitch in Schumer's face, every flicker of unease. The cameras zoomed in close, capturing the way he shifted in his chair, as if trying to regain control of his body language before his words betrayed him further. He let out a laugh, short, forced, and condescending. Young lady, he said, drawing out the words with the kind of paternal tone that had once silenced many critics. You clearly have passion, but passion is not experience. Experience teaches you how to separate those who serve themselves from those who serve the people. And Pam Bondi, well, her record speaks volumes. She's built a career on spectacle. And you're too new to the game to see it. The audience murmured uneasily. A few chuckles scattered here and there, but they were drowned out quickly by boos and hisses. It wasn't the knockout blow Schumer had been hoping for. If anything, his tone only deepened the impression that he was talking down to Karoline rather than addressing her arguments. Karoline didn't blink. She leaned in, her posture straight, her voice sharp enough to cut through the static of dissent. With all due respect, Senator, the American people don't need a lecture on experience from someone who has spent nearly his entire adult life in Washington while families outside these walls struggle to buy groceries, while parents are afraid to let their kids play in the park, and while small businesses collapse under the weight of failed policies. If that's the kind of experience you're selling, no wonder so many Americans are desperate for change. The crowd exploded, cheers, clapping, even some whistles piercing through the roar. The sound rattled Schumer, who tried to wave dismissively, his smirk faltering under the lights. The host raised his hand, struggling to bring the room back to order, but Karoline had already captured the moment, commanding the energy of the room like a seasoned veteran rather than a newcomer. Pam Bondi glanced sideways at Karoline, a spark of admiration in her eyes. She'd been in many televised battles herself, but watching someone so young handle a titan like Schumer with this kind of precision was something special. For the first time that evening, Bondi's lips curled into a wide smile. Schumer adjusted his tie, a nervous tick he couldn't suppress. His voice rose, tinged with defensiveness. This isn't about me. This isn't about my career or about Washington. This is about honesty in politics, and I'm not going to sit here and let you pretend that Pam Bondi's record doesn't show exactly what I just said. The people deserve the truth. Karoline's response was immediate, almost as if she had anticipated his pivot. Exactly, Senator. The people do deserve the truth. And the truth is that your brand of politics, the backroom deals, the grandstanding, the obsession with cameras and soundbites, has left this country weaker, not stronger. The truth is that while you're busy tearing down women like Pam Bondi with cheap insults, real Americans are asking why their leaders in Washington can't seem to solve even the simplest problems. Inflation, crime, border security, issues you've had decades to fix and haven't. The words landed with the force of a sledgehammer. The crowd roared again, some even rising to their feet. The host winced, knowing he was losing control of the conversation entirely, but also knowing this kind of electricity was exactly what kept ratings alive. Schumer's voice cracked as he tried to interject. No, hold on, let's not distort the facts here. Karoline didn't let him finish. Senator, you can't hide behind facts when the facts are plain for everyone to see. Families can't afford gas. Mothers are working 2 jobs just to make ends meet. Communities don't feel safe. And you dare call her a narcissist? She gestured toward Pam Bondi. The hypocrisy is breathtaking. The only narcissism Americans see tonight is a career politician so addicted to power that he lashes out at anyone who dares expose his failures. The audience erupted louder than before, chants of, "Karoline! Karoline!" breaking out from pockets of the crowd. Cameras panned to the audience, capturing faces flushed with excitement, fists pumping the air. Schumer sat frozen, his jaw tight, his eyes darting between Karoline, the cameras, and the restless audience that no longer seemed on his side. Pam Bondi finally leaned toward her microphone. Her voice was soft, calm, and cutting. "Chuck, I don't need to defend myself tonight. I think Karoline just said everything millions of Americans have been wanting to tell you for years." The applause thundered so loudly it shook the studio walls. Schumer's forced smile slipped again as he fumbled with his pen, tapping it nervously against the desk. He muttered something under his breath, inaudible but caught by the camera's close-up, that looked suspiciously like frustration boiling over. Social media was already ablaze. Hashtags like #Karoline owns Schumer and #Bondi vindicated trended within minutes. Clips of the exchange flooded Twitter, TikTok, and Facebook, with commentators on both sides analyzing every word. Conservative voices hailed it as a turning point, while even some moderate and liberal pundits admitted Schumer had been outclassed in the exchange. The host, sensing the futility of trying to restore balance, leaned into the chaos. "Well," he said with a strained laugh, "if the goal tonight was to have a lively debate, I'd say we've succeeded." Karoline, seizing the last moment before commercial break, delivered one final blow. "Lively debates are good, but accountability is better. And the American people are tired of politicians who throw stones at others while living in glass houses. That's the real story tonight, Senator. Not Pam Bondi, not me, but you, and the decades of broken promises that have finally caught up with you." The words hung in the air like a verdict. The audience erupted one last time, clapping and shouting over the outro music as the network cut to commercials. Schumer sat in silence, his smile gone, his face pale under the lights. Pam Bondi and Karoline exchanged a brief, knowing glance, 2 women, different in style but united in that moment by Schumer's collapse. When the cameras turned off, producers rushed onto the stage, buzzing with adrenaline. Reporters were already preparing headlines. Schumer routed on live TV, Leavitt steals the spotlight, Bondi vindicated without saying a word. For Schumer, it was supposed to have been an easy night, a chance to score points at the expense of a political opponent. Instead, he left the stage diminished, his words twisted back against him in front of a national audience. For Karoline Leavitt, it was the kind of night that could launch a career to new heights. And for Pam Bondi, it was vindication, not because she defended herself, but because she didn't have to. Karoline had destroyed him for her, and the people watching at home knew it.